Guess who's back? Back again. May is back. Tell your friends. Hi friends, and welcome back to the absolute pit of total hell. Girl Hell 1999. And I'm the girl, and this is the hell. Welcome to it. We are doing part 2 of the disturbing movies Iceberg today. And if you don't know what that is, you should consider watching my first video. But if you want to know now, basically it's this nasty little bitch that's been haunting my nightmares. I fucking hate this thing. I don't like it. I look at it and it bothers me. I roll over in bed and I see it. There it is. I'm holding it. I thought I was cuddling my cat, but no, I'm cuddling the iceberg. And it turns out this has all been a weird nightmare. Oh god. Yeah, researching this one has not been particularly fun, I will admit. First things first though, I would like to submit a couple of little corrections from the last video. First of all, I do know that Midsommar is about a white supremacist death cult. I do know that. I was joking. Also, Ed and Lorraine Warren are real people, and they're human beings that existed and were alive. So no, I don't stan them because, like, why would you stan a person? They probably had things that they did in their life that were good, and they probably had things in their life that they did that were bad. The other thing I'd like to include real quick is that nothing on this beautiful, beautiful bastard of a list is banned or illegal. That's right, none of this is illegal. You can own this stuff and it's fine. And we will be getting into why and how that's true, while also talking about why they still are pretty fucking bad. But none of them are illegal. Now, does that mean that there aren't terrible, horrible, really fucked up, no good, very bad things on the internet? All the ones that I thought were rumored to be worse than they were turned out to be worse than they were. Absolutely, there are without a doubt no good, very bad things on the internet. I also would like to include that I'm more telling you about some of these things so that if you hear about them, you can avoid them. And wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't it be nice to be able to avoid some of this shit? I know I would have liked to have avoided some of it, but I had to look at all of it. However, just because a lot of the things on the list are not illegal, I think I should probably state for the record that these things will probably get you banned from places for posting about, posting images of, posting video of, downright posting. I know that you love to post. I love to post too. I'm posting right now. But try really hard not to post Guso milk anywhere where decent people would be upset by it, because you're probably gonna get banned. Tread lightly, my friends, lest ye be banned. So I had a big criticism of the list last time we went through it, that I feel like it jumps very, very quickly from like pretty mundane stuff to really fucked up stuff. I feel like there's a lot of titles and a lot of things that exist that somehow didn't end up on this iceberg and totally should be here because they are that fucked up, or they are that crazy, or they are that cool, and you should know that they exist. You deserve to know that they exist. And Mama is gonna tell ya all about them. So I've decided to add another category of, like, a tier to the iceberg. Other movies that are really fucked up before you get to the real, actual, really super not safe for life stuff. Without further ado, we are going to begin the iceberg by talking about movies that are not yet on the iceberg, but should be, and I'm gonna do that rather quickly. Let's go. Ishi the Killer. Okay, so Ishi the Killer, Visitor Q, and Audition are shockingly not on this iceberg, and totally should be, because Takashi Miike makes movies that will make you squirm out of your little pants. And yes, I mean, compared to, like, you know, Fubar, it's not the worst shit that exists. This is still technically narrative. I think Takashi Miike deserves to be mentioned. I really kind of, like, have grown to enjoy watching his movies, especially with friends. Their first reactions are always really phenomenal. They're a lot more party movies as far as, like, gore movies go than a lot of other ones, even though, like, yes, they're not okay. There's like torture and rape and all kinds of bad business in all of them. Except for Audition. There's no rape in Audition. But the things that are in Audition are far, far bad. Don't worry, they're terrible. Antichrist. So Antichrist, I forgot to mention this when I was talking about Lars von Trier last time, but I find it fascinating that the iceberg picked The House That Jack Built over Antichrist for being included as, like, the most fucked up one. Antichrist is a nearly 3-hour-long, depressing movie about a couple going through loss while mutilating themselves. The lady do be mutilating herself. That is a theme that continues throughout the rest of the Iceberg. Women's self-mutilation as entertainment turns out to be something that a lot of people make movies about. You'd be surprised. And yeah, I mean, the end of this movie has some genital mutilation like you ain't never seen in a narrative film. So I do highly recommend that you give that one the old college try. Gummo is a Harmony Korine film, and if you don't know who Harmony Korine is, he's basically a master troll mixed with a filmmaker who makes good movies, bad movies, good movies. I honestly don't know how I feel about Harmony Korine. It's been a whole life of mine of not knowing how I feel about Harmony Korine. I figure one of these days I'll have to sit down and rewatch all of his movies and just come up with a conclusion about him. But if you don't know about Harmony Korine, he is the very young screenwriter of Kids and very young director of Gummo. He went on to be a person with regular age, you know, like now he's in his 40s, but then he was a child when he made these movies. Just super young. And Gummo is a very nihilistic movie about growing up as a kid and having kind of nothing to do and having to make sense of society for yourself. It deals with the harrowing realities of bullying to children and mental illness to children and neglect, kids being abandoned, basically finding their own system of economics through the selling of dead cats. Gummo is weird and wild and kind of disgusting for reasons that you can't necessarily put your finger on. The thing I love about Gummo is very comparable to a lot of disturbing movies that are the most disturbing or the best of the most disturbing. It's not that they're showing you something that's horrible, it's that they're showing you something that's mundane, but the horribleness creeps in on you. Goodbye, Uncle Tom. Okay, so, Mondo Kane and Africa Adio do appear on this list later on. I don't understand why Goodbye Uncle Tom didn't make it here. So if you don't know about this is basically the Sallow or 120 Days of Sodom for the antebellum South. Pretty racist movie that's pretty not okay to watch. Slavery and how slaves were treated, sold, abused, and used for their physical bodies and their sexual organs and their labors. It's a fucking nightmare. And it's very, 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 very long. I feel like a lot of people aren't willing to try and engage with this, and there are a lot of good reasons for that. But also, I'm curious to see what more intellectuals would have to say about this, decrying slavery while doing a little bit of slavery itself, because they used the cast taken from a Haitian dictator who just gave them however many people they needed for the movie, extras. You know, maybe the extras were super into it, but I doubt it, based on the things I've seen in the film. But all I know is these people really didn't need this to happen to them to make this movie. The Devils, somewhat lost classic film that was made in 1971 for actual serious money. A movie where a priest is so hot that a bunch of nuns really want to have sex with him, but because they can't have sex with him, they fabricate this entire story where they were possessed by demons that made them act out on their sexual proclivities, and that's the only thing they could use to justify why they found Father Grandier so goddamn hot. And there is a scene halfway through the movie that I have in fact seen where a group of nuns take their clothes off, rip down a statue of Christ, and then fuck the shit out of it. And I know that that's horrible or blasphemous or something. It would offend somebody, I think. But Ken Russell made a big spectacle out of the whole thing, and because he did so, he pissed off Warner Brothers so bad that they burned most of the film and said that they would never ever release it. And to this day, you still cannot purchase a Warner Brothers official copy of the director's cut of The Devils. I don't even think you can get a copy of the original cut. And if you can get a copy of the original cut, it's missing a lot of key material. It's a big shame that this movie is not more readily available and widely seen, as it is one of my favorite films, but also it's a harrowing nightmare. Tread lightly. The Killing of America. Okay, so this is kind of like Banned for Television, which is sort of a later addition onto the list as well. Long-ass documentary that just goes through a bunch of scenarios by which people in America were killed. And it's like kind of exploring violence in the country, and the Zapruder film is in there. I mean, it's a lot of stuff that you've probably seen in your life. Some of it's pretty fucking shocking and pretty bad to see. I live in that area and have been near that area and have therefore seen the Zapruder film more times than, well, I can count. Maybe that's why I'm like this. I don't know. Enter the Void. Okay, so this isn't like as disturbing as like MD Pope or something crazy on the list, but I do think it's worth mentioning because Enter the Void is a movie about somebody kind of going on a DMT trip. During their weird DMT trip, they experience their trauma over and over and over again at this one particular point in the movie, and it becomes excruciating. Also, this person like is killed and dies and floats above the whole movie. So the whole movie is from this character's perspective, looking down at the world that's leaving him behind. It's fucking wild. And it's honestly probably one of the least nihilistic movies on this list, surprisingly. I don't know if I ever want to watch it again because, oh boy, reliving that trauma over and over and over again sure was a pain in my ass. It is a great film, and you should check it out. Aftermath Genesis. So I have no idea why the person who made the Iceberg didn't include this, because this is honestly one of the most abhorrent films I've ever sat through. Aftermath Genesis is about two guys who are doing autopsies, and then after hours, one of the guys like leaves. One of the guys doing the autopsies is like, heck, I'm gonna just fuck this dead body. And then he fucks that dead body. He has sex with it and all. It's genuinely probably the most vile depiction of necrophilia I've ever seen on film. Not great things to put in your movie. They made an entire movie about it. Luckily, it is a short film, so it's somewhat more tolerable than if it were a feature. But oh boy, I sure hated it, and it deserves to be on this iceberg. Men Behind the Sun. Okay, so Men Behind the Sun is a whole series of movies about Japanese atrocities. There's also Black Sun, the Nanking Massacre is included in this series, but Men Behind the Sun is basically about Unit 731, which we'll talk about later. Basically, scientific experimentation, horrible torture, and abuse and violence. You love to see it. Some of the things that Unit 731 learned, what freezing temperature somebody's fingers are at and when you can break them off. Thanks, Unit 731. Begotten. It's a black and white film with like really low quality intentionally. That's a religious film sort of about a retelling of the Bible, but through a more kind of nihilistic lens, I think. It's a little hard to interpret, and every time I've watched it, I've left it with a different interpretation, but my interpretation usually starts with, damn, I gotta go to sleep. Come and see. So it's kind of like one of the only war movies that doesn't encourage war, and it also doesn't make a spectacle of war. It only shows you its atrocities and the products that it leaves behind. It doesn't show you big sweeping battles and you're like, wow, look at all these people organized for a cause. You're not thinking about that as much as you're thinking about, damn, look at these people burned alive. Singapore Sling. So this is a vomit comedy. I don't really know why. I don't know. The one thing you should know about me is like the only real thing that bothers me in like fucked up movies is vomit. Like I don't love a vomit. A vomit just, and it usually involves people ingesting it, and I don't love that either. But Singapore Sling is, it's a comedy and it is funny, but it also has lots of vomiting in it, and I hate that. There's one part where someone is having sex with someone and they're just vomiting on them while doing it. And you're like, damn, that sucks. Trash Humpers. Okay, so this one isn't necessarily as disturbing as it is just nihilistic and weird. It's also a Harmony Korine movie from the director of Gummo, but the whole bit was he was directing it so that it would be this really weird found footage movie that people could go to their local Blockbuster and rent like a copy of Jerry Maguire or something, and Harmony Korine was going to replace the tape that was in Jerry Maguire with a tape of trash humpers, so people get it home and they see old people humping trash. Along the way, somebody was like, hey bud, you should just release this movie, and he's like, dang, you right. So trash humpers is kind of this amazing relic of a thing that exists for purely prank reasons, kind of, but Harmony Korine sure did make that. Tideland. Okay, so Tideland is a Terry Gilliam movie. I made an entire analysis video about this particular movie. It's widely hated. Most people dislike it because it has depictions of childhood sexuality and also children dealing with death in a really, really, really nihilistic way. Basically, there's this girl and her parents make her make drugs for them, and then when they do the heroin, they like die, and she doesn't understand the concept of death because they've neglected her so long and haven't explained that concept to her. She just doesn't understand, so she just like treats them like they're alive and like nothing ever happened. It's fucking a nightmare. Adam Chaplin. Okay, so I believe this is an action movie. I've never seen this, but I wanted to include it because I have seen enough scenes of it to know that it is one of the goriest movies of all time. Just, it's bloody as all fuck. If you've ever seen Brain Dead or Dead Alive, which is directed by Peter Jackson, Adam Chaplin and Dead Alive are both very, very, very bloody and gory movies that are kind of more fun and accessible than a lot of the other things on this list. So if you want to get into this kind of thing, but you don't really want it to be so nihilistic and serious, might I recommend hopping over to Adam Chaplin and seeing what that's all about. And of course, the last thing that I'd like to include on the iceberg as just like the most unwatchable shit is, of course, Nostalgia Critics' The Wall. Why did this have to happen to me? Why, Doug? Why? Okay, so those are my additions. That's my little add-in area for the iceberg of stuff that you should maybe consider checking out that's also fucked up and weird. Now we're going to get into Tier 4, the really bad stuff, but we're not quite into the horrifically bad stuff yet. We're just into the really bad stuff. So, without further ado, the really bad stuff. Slow torture puke chamber. Okay, so slow torture puke chamber, slaughtered vomit dolls, and regurgitated sacrifice. I'm just gonna throw them all into this like lump sum because they do all have their own individual properties, but they're really not worth getting into. So you did hear me right. Slaughtered vomit dolls, regurgitated sacrifice, and slow torture puke chamber. Now I believe there's 4 or 5 of these, but the 3 original movies are, oh boy. So these are exactly the kind of trash that hurts me in specific, and I hate it. These are vomit gore movies, which is to say they are gory movies about people vomiting on each other. And not only are they vomiting on each other, they also vomit in each other's mouths, like on each other's bodies, like they drink the vomit. It's a lot of vomit drinking. To be honest with you, more than anything, it's vomit drinking. No, I'm fine. I'm just fine. So, notoriously, I watched these 3 movies. I sat down and I watched all 3 of these movies. And Lucifer Valentine, the director of this movie, yes, that is his real name. He reached out to me and was very nice. Yeah, I don't know exactly what I think about these. Like, I don't think that they're very good movies on a technical level. I don't necessarily think that they're the best movies on any narrative level. I don't think they're really doing anything that's all that great, but I will say that if we're talking about party movies you turn on that make your friends go, ew, this is one of them. It's more produced than a lot of the stuff that you end up seeing. I admire Lucifer Valentine for not looking at, like, videos of people vomiting and being like, I'm just gonna compile a compilation of people vomiting and post that online and call that a compilation. No. He was like, I'm gonna make these movies. I'm gonna get off my ass and I'm gonna make my vomit gore movies. I'm gonna make some girls vomit and we're all gonna come. And you know what? Good for them. I hope it was a satisfying one. Life and Death of a Porno Gang. Okay, so this is often considered to be somewhat worse a Serbian film, but I don't know if I would necessarily say it's somewhat worse a Serbian film. It is a film from Serbia. It is lower on the iceberg tier, but I think more than anything that's for obscurity reasons and not necessarily because it's worse. Like, a Serbian film is really fucking bad. Life and Death of a Porno Gang is also really fucking bad. But I will say one of them does have a lot more baby shit in it. And we fucking don't like that, do we? So one of the most frequent disturbing movie cliches is the porn to snuff pipeline. So basically what that entails is like this belief amongst many of these filmmakers that when you're making a lot of porn, you have a tendency to get a lot of gigs that you don't necessarily want, that are doing things way more hardcore than you'd like to do. And some people are looking for money, so they incidentally go wandering down these rabbit holes, only to end up in human trafficking, red rooms, snuff films, or overall just really bad porn gore stuff that they can't seem to get themselves away from. And while there is some level of truth to this, maybe even more truth to it than we'd like to know, these movies are being made by people that don't necessarily know an awful lot about that, but they are making movies about it, and they do certainly think it's happening. And many of them incidentally kind of caused that to happen. Life and Death of a Porno Gang, just like a Serbian film, is about the porn to snuff pipeline, and it's up to you to decide. August Underground 1 through 3. So on the iceberg, it just says August Underground, but there's a lot to this. There's a lot to unpack in this. Like August Underground 1 through 3, that's August Underground Mortem, and August Underground Penance are all films directed by Fred Vogel of Toe Tag Productions. And this man makes some really maniacal ass movies. Like, these are very diabolical things. Even people later on the list will be calling in the Toe Tag people to help them work on their movies. Fred Vogel gets shit done in the disturbing movies community. People really like Fred. These movies are not okay to see. Bad to watch. Don't like it. It's kind of like being touched by someone you don't like. You're like, get the fuck off me. That's kind of August Underground Mortem in specific. Like, the first movie is mostly about them pissing on a girl and torturing her and then going to a Korn concert. But the second movie is more about this, like, family of killers. Think like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but like way worse. And there's this one part where they're all kind of rooting on this one guy to cut off another guy's dick and put it into his mouth because he's like bound and can't get away. It's really bad to see. I don't like it. And August Underground Penance is really interesting because there's this one scene where they go to a Christmas party and they interrupt the family Christmas by like murdering, raping the whole family. And of course this is horrible, this is terrible, awful, but the cinema of it. Like, there's a ticking clock element, there's like character interplay, there's like drama going on. I'm like thinking, wow, you know, for a faux snuff movie, these are kind of movies. Whoa. I wouldn't go out of my way to say that I love these movies or anything, or even that I like them. I have seen them the one time, and that was enough for me, and I don't really need to go seeing them again. But I will say that there was surprisingly more to these than there is to stuff as we go down. So keep in mind that this might be the best it ever gets again. This. Snuff 102. Okay, so this is kind of the porn to snuff pipeline thing, but there's a journalist who's looking into snuff films and then kind of ends up in a really, really bad one. Like a really, really super not good one. Like, nobody needs to be ending up in a snuff film, but oh man. Just general nastiness, general torture, and nastiness. Admittedly, I think the iceberg is kind of laid out so that some of the things are like shit you would find out about, and then it's weird to know about it more than it is that it's like really, really severely bad. And so like Snuff 102 is very, very, very bad, yes. But also it's more here for its obscurity value, because there are certainly worse things. Even on this tier, there are worse things. I can think of many. Guinea Pig. Okay, so the Guinea Pig movies are kind of fascinating. They're directed by Hideshi Hino, or at least somewhat produced by Hideshi Hino. There's a little bit of fogginess as far as like everything goes with these movies, but basically the whole deal is these are faux snuff movies with like a tinge, a twinge, a taste, a touch of art. Hideshi Hino, like, yes, is a weird gore man, but also he was like, okay, but this one's gonna be about flowers and how we bloom into this lovely bouquet of gore. Well, and he's got a guy in a samurai costume at one bit. It's just, there's a lot of strangeness. One of the movies is called Mermaid in a Manhole, and it's about a woman who's a mermaid who's slowly like dying and rotting while a painter is painting her. That is kind of great. There's a lot of really gross like little pustules, but they're filled with paint. So he takes the pustules of paint and he paints with them. This is horrible. I know this is horrible. This sounds terrible to you. You don't want to watch this, but I'm trying to tell you, if there were disturbing movies that had some level of artistry to them, the guinea pig movies are surprisingly kind of like that. One would not think that there would be artistry in the guinea pig movies, but there is actual artistry in the guinea pig movies. And famously, Charlie Sheen had a real big problem with one of these once and reported it as a real snuff film, but it turns out, no, not a real snuff film, so whatever. Necromantic. Okay, so I made an entire video about this because this shit is whack. So Necromantic is this like series of films, 2 films directed by Jörg Buttgereit. He is a German man who makes some of the craziest movies you will ever see in your life. So there's this image, this famous image here. There's really not an awful lot more to say than this image ought to capture it. A guy is sad, so he brings his girlfriend a dead body and he's like, let's have sex with it. And then she's like, okay. So they have sex with the dead body, and then she grows to like the dead body more than him. He starts to feel bad about this and goes on a crazy murderous rampage, and then he dies. Then it picks up in the second movie where she digs him back up so she can have sex with his dead body because she likes him as a dead body more than she likes him as a living body. How about that? Feminism, right, girls? They're bad movies, probably more than anything. Like, they're super not great, but man, are they spicy. And they are filled with unnecessary animal violence like I have never seen. Like, and I mean unnecessary in the sense that there is no justification. Like, in Cannibal Holocaust, there's a very, very minimal justification. Like, they try to justify it, but it doesn't really hold water. But in Necromantic, they don't even try to justify it. They just like to. Get used to it because animal violence seems to be something that a lot of people are really into because so many people have made fucking movies about it. Viva la Muerte. So I haven't seen this film and I hadn't up until recently heard of this film at all, but it's a midnight movie in the same vein as like Eraserhead or The Holy Mountain or Pink Flamingos or something like that. That's really cool. That interests me in it, but apparently it's a very gross movie about the Spanish Civil War and it's super surrealist and comes at you with a really weird angle and it's kind of surprisingly good. So I might have to check this one out one of these days, like for realsies. This is probably one of my couple that I saw on the Iceberg and was like, huh, I didn't know about that. There are only a couple of those for me because unfortunately I've seen a lot of this stuff before. Where the dead go to die. Jimmy Screamer Claus, if that is your real name, is a good boy who makes some 3D rendered nightmares. And I mean nightmares. And I mean nightmares.
Your memories and when you die, it expels the liquid.
This shit will fuck you up. And that's no, like, little joke. This is a animated film about some of the most depraved, like, conceptual work that you'll ever think about. It's a series of vignettes about things that are just gross and sometimes banal and sometimes really kind of dumb and edgy and immature, but also sometimes push you right into that place where you don't want to be. Where you're like, fuck. It's what I'd like to call negative nihilism. Not to be confused with positive nihilism, where you're like, my life has no meaning. Yay, I'm free, I get to have fun, I can do whatever I want, and I don't have to worry about things meaning anything. And then there's like negative nihilism, that's like, things don't mean anything, which means you and your dog should fuck the dead body of your parents. You heard me right. You heard me right. Melancholy der Engel. Oh god. You know, there are some things in your life where you're like, I don't think I'm ever gonna have to to know about that or talk about that anymore. So you have the recycle bin in your brain. So you take the file of Melancholy Der Engel and all of its contents, you put that right in the recycle bin, but you forget to empty the recycle bin. So unfortunately, I still remember Melancholy Der Engel, but I did try to forget it. And if I had enough booze, maybe I could do it. Melancholy Der Engel is a movie about a group of people that, while experiencing the potential of a future death, decide to live a life of depraved mania, which is very similar to like sort of the way that a lot of these filmmakers approach the genre. They feel like they have to do depraved shit because that's life, man. Really, really gross, has a whole bunch of terrible animal violence that's super inexcusable, not very good to see, and bad. Also, the movie, I think, doesn't really amount to very much. Surprisingly, a lot of this movie starts to blur the line between what is fiction and what is non-fiction. Obviously, a lot of this stuff has real-world value and truth to it, but it's hard to say that it's non-fiction. Like, we would still call it fiction. So, like Melancholy Der Engel, for instance, yeah, it's a fictional movie. It's a narrative movie, but also the BDSM, animal violence, and a lot of the sex is very real, including all the scat stuff is real, the pee stuff is real, the vomit stuff is real. So then you start to wonder, well, what isn't real? What is narrative about it? And then you kind of wonder, damn, does that make this non-fiction or fiction? It starts to blur that line. But soon, the line won't need to be blurred anymore, as we will be just seeing real footage of things that happened. Juvenile crime. Okay, so I actually wrote some notes here about all this stuff, and this is the most cursed notes of all time. Like, everything on these notes is just about stuff you don't want to know about. I think at the end of this video series, I might burn these notes. I don't want to have these notes. Juvenile crime is basically a really rare movie. There's another movie similar to this called Concrete. There's a documentary about it. There's a couple of little things like that, and a lot of YouTubers have talked about it, but it's the story of Junko Furuta. She was a young girl who endured 44 days of hideous torture, some of the worst torture that anybody has ever documented. And after she was tortured to literal death for 44 days, she was placed in a drum and filled with concrete. Really makes you fucking upset, doesn't it? Peeves that fucking noodle in there, huh? So yeah, this is a notoriously rare movie though, because it's fairly exploitational when it comes to talking about this story. The story itself deserves some level of justice and honesty, and I think while it is difficult often to find meaning in suffering, I admire people making the attempt to try and find meaning in the suffering. But I really don't admire people exploiting the suffering for entertainment of others, for kind of weirdly fetishy reasons, it seems. I don't know. Juvenile crime is not one that I'm actively pursuing, and if I was actively pursuing it, I probably wouldn't be able to find it anyway because it is notoriously rare. You'd be surprised the fucking things you can find on the internet these days. My God. Philosophy of a knife. Okay, so I'm gonna be straight with you about this. I did not enjoy this movie very much. I watched it 2 nights ago, and yes, it is gory, and yes, it is about Unit 731 in the same way that Men Behind the Sun is about Unit 731, and medical experimentation, torture, things like that. Only this one really has a thorn in its side for socialism or left-leaning stuff. It feels like it's coming at it with a narrative. And so there's a lot of stuff when we get further down the list, especially in the documentary stuff, where they start to include a lot more this horrible atrocity is justification for us to continue to do violence to minorities, or continued violence towards this group, or continued hate towards this group, or something like that. So keep in mind that as we go, a lot of these things do kind of have a little bit of a political narrative bent. Something you'll find is that a lot of these movies start to disagree vehemently with you and what you believe in. I feel like gore is one entryway, but but giving me bad politics is not gonna work for me, sister. That said, there were horrible communist atrocities, and those have been very well documented. The filmmaker directly says that this is all a product of, like, Marxism. Like, this is what happens when workers, like, stand up for themselves. You get atrocities like this. I don't know. Just seems kind of dumb to me. Maybe could have given that one a little bit more of a nuanced thought there, sister. And look at that! That's another tier done! We did it! We did another little tier. Isn't that great? I'm so happy that we've done it. We've got so many left. We've got so many left. And oh man, I've got extra stuff to talk about too. This is gonna end up being an entirely independent iceberg that I'm probably gonna have to publish of all of these movies, organized, and I'm just gonna post it somewhere for everybody to have of all of this shit. Oh god. So I guess we're gonna get into part 5 now, aren't we? Alright, so part 5 is like bordering on what I would say would be considered things that are not safe for life. No matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, if you Google this shit and you show it to somebody, you're gonna get in trouble, so don't do it. And also, looking at it for yourself damages your lifetime. Potentially. It could potentially damage your mind, potentially traumatizing things. So the way that I would put it is real world violence has this tendency to look like fake violence. It looks and sounds more like a movie than movies do sometimes. Like that pitch shift of reality has a tendency to manifest as trauma to you. So what I mean is if you end up looking at an awful lot of people dying, like in gory things and really like almost surreal violence, like surreal, realistic violence, you start to depersonalize a little bit from your reality and see the world as a scary, horrible place. So I'm warning you all again because we are moving into not safe for life stuff. And as we move into not safe for life stuff, you're not going to like the things that we learn about, because I didn't like learning about these things, and now I get to tell you about them. Isn't YouTube fun? Isn't YouTube fun? Women's flesh, my red guts. Something that you'll see on the iceberg as we go down is we're going to start to see certain people pop up a lot, like certain names, certain producers, certain people that make specific things. There are people that have identified the market for these specific things, and they do provide. Women's Flesh, My Red Guts is directed by the same director as Tumbling Doll of Flesh. Both movies are kind of like faux snuff-ish movies about people getting mercilessly hacked to pieces, women specifically, and they also are about the porn to snuff pipeline. They're kind of like faux snuff movies about women getting not only killed, not only raped, not only like scat stuff happen, like horrible shit happens to them, but also they are dismembered, ripped apart, and fucked every step of the way. The mixture between porn and mutilation is where things start to get really, really, really bad to see and experience. Specifically like Tumbling Doll of Flesh. Dear God. That movie is one of the worst narrative films that I think exists. I don't think that would be that controversial of a take. There are worse ones, maybe, but that one's pretty fucking bad. And like they're all faux snuff, so the purpose, I guess, is to try and trick you into thinking that it's real, and some of it like does very much feel very real, but also it's the psychological aspect of enduring these films. A lot of it is like not having the proper context or understanding like torture and murder. Not the pain, but the suffering. Seeing something that confronts your understanding of suffering can be very taxing on the mind. Careful with these. Careful! Ostermontag. Okay, so this is kind of an OG August Underground. So this was made like a while back. It's like a narrative film. It's not super great. Most people I saw online said that it was fairly forgettable, or kind of one of those movies that a lot of people know about but not a lot of people like. I might be wrong about that. Maybe there are some Ostermontag stands out there, but I don't really think that there are an awful lot of Ostermontag stands out there. Kind of a prototypical movie that started this genre or kicked this kind of stuff off, or is a classic of this genre, but isn't necessarily one that holds up today. Girl Hell 1999. Okay, so I hate it and I don't want to deal with it. I've decided that it's time to don the cat ears because things are getting a little bit sad and spicy around here, aren't they, folks? Okay, so Girl Hell 1999 is a hell for girls like me in 1999. So this is a new genre for us as we continue forward, and it's a new genre that you're going to hear about that you may not have known existed until this very moment. And that genre is sexual self-mutilation, or more specifically, sexualized self-dismemberment. So I don't know if y'all are aware of the musician Poppy, well, I guess she's also a YouTuber, or she was, but on her like newest metal record that's been around for a couple years, I guess at this point, she talks about how she has developed this insatiable lust for blood and the taste of blood and the texture of blood, and like tried to enjoy sweet things, but sweet things just never work. Blood's the thing she wants. So that's kind of the vibe with like Girl Hell 1999 and a lot of movies like that. They're girls with insatiable bloodlusts for themselves in a sexualized way. It's a spicy one! Ooh! It's kind of an alternate Earth where everything is really bad and really nothing makes sense, everything's really fucked up for her. It's kind of a rape and revenge where she gets raped, and then as revenge, she starts like taking revenge out on her own body or mutilating her own body. It's for guys who like to jerk it to the concept of women cutting off their own arms and legs, pulling out their own guts and shit. And everybody knows a guy just like that, right? Mai-chan's daily life. Okay, so Mai-chan's daily life is kind of like a Girl Hell 1999 situation where Mai-chan is basically like forced into this role of being a maid and a servant for a lot of people that have sexual and violent desires and needs. She is there to fulfill them constantly forever. So the whole bit is that she just regenerates endlessly, so she like enjoys having herself cut to pieces and people cut her to pieces, and it's no big deal. She'll regenerate and then she gets to enjoy it again. Isn't that the weirdest fetish? Like imagine having a fetish for a woman that regenerates so you can hack her to pieces over and over and over so you can continue to get off. Imagine being that guy. Eccentric psycho cinema. Okay, so this is kind of a weird way of titling what this is. It is a series of what they commonly refer to as the vulva in a jar movies. So it's basically about this guy. It's kind of like a guinea pig sort of vibe. Instead, the vibe is cutting off women's vaginas and showing it to them. Like being like, look at your vagina, I took it from you. What a fucking creep, man. A lot of people really swear by these, a lot of people really like them, and I found quite a few fans, so I was a little bit surprised, but people are really big fans of this. There are 7 of these movies, and in each one of them, some of the similar beats are played out. It's like kidnapping, dismemberment, murder, things like that. But with the caveat that there's usually some kind of weird something or other in there, like one movie the guy pees in a girl's vagina. That's terrible. Don't pee in my vagina. But, I mean, primarily it's all about, cutting off the vagina, showing it to somebody, and then putting it in a jar. And there's 7 of them. So if you ever wanted 7 whole movies just about that, congratulations. There's not 1, there's not 2. There are 7 for you. Don't you feel special? The Taming of Rebecca. It's kind of exactly like the title implies. Like, what do you think The Taming of Rebecca would be about? Some sort of bondage or BDSM situation that just is really rough about some asshole taming a woman. Of course, the way to do that is like through intense depersonalization in BDSM. It's kind of the way that people look at like breaking a horse, but they do it with a person through bondage. So it's shockingly real bondage porn. It is real. I mean, ultimately it is real, but I mean like it's shocking. And it's real, and it's bondage porn. And I mean, if the title, The Taming of Rebecca, bothers you somewhere inside yourself, maybe you're not one of the people that should be tamed by this particular one, sis. The Necrophiles. Okay, so this movie comes from 1997, and it is a big old funny joke that a lot of people seem to find funny. I guess since the Wendigoon video about the disturbing iceberg, a lot of people have been rewatching it and talking about how funny it is. So the whole bit is there's like a zombie rapist. So it's reverse necrophilia. So instead of like people having sex with dead bodies, the dead body comes back from the dead to have sex with people. You know, you give them points for literary cleverness. They have an understanding of dramatic irony. It's apparently dedicated to Joe D'Amato, which is really, really funny if you know anything about really bad Italian movies. There's also a demon baby fetus in it. I have not yet seen this one, but I'm telling you what, the more I learn about this, the more I'm like, dang, this is gonna have to be one of the ones that I'm gonna have to watch. You know, unlike The Taming of Rebecca, which I'm probably going to try to not watch, as to not get tamed. The next film is called The Gateway Meat. I don't know exactly everything there is to know about this, but I did fall down a rabbit hole with this one in particular for a long time because there's a lot to it and it's kind of weird. So first off, the movie is directed by Ron DeCaro. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce your name, Ron, if you're alive or not. I don't actually know if Ron is still with us. I assume Ron is still with us because I found his Twitter account. And, I mean, I wasn't sure if it was his Twitter account. I couldn't be for sure if it was his Twitter account, but he did tweet this. So I'm thinking it probably is his Twitter account. Yeah, this guy's made some really fucking weird movies. They're kind of like August Underground movies. They're kind of like Fred Vogel style sort of stuff, but they're family oriented. So it's like family gets together killing people in a mundane fashion. They're trying to build up the helm of their father who just died, who was a Satanist. So they're also trying to be really good Satanists. It's genuinely just fire. I don't even understand. And of course, Ron DeCaro is the lead of the film as well. So it's a self-insert sort of thing. And throughout the film, there are like some pretty hideous set pieces that you don't want to see. He also has another film called Eating Razors, which just the thought of that bothers me. I don't want anybody to start any fights, but I'm kind of a little bit, I must admit, on the fuck Ron train a little bit. Like, just a little bit on the fuck Ron train because he did super have his daughter be in this movie. And she's like young and she participates, but she doesn't participate, and he kept her away from it for the most part. From what I've heard, he supposedly kept her away from the production of it, but he did also shoot her doing something for it, and she was involved. So in my brain, like, imagine you're 30 years old and you finally see that movie your dad made that you were in, and you're like, oh, dang, Dad, why did you do that? Don't you hate it when your daddy's a rat bastard like that? I do. And finally, the last fucking thing for this particular part of the video is called the bunny game. So if you don't know about the bunny game, I have decided to add this to this particular segment of the video because I don't know if people know about this, but so it's a movie that's fairly okay shot, bind, torture, kill kind of movie. It is fake, but my God, is it something to endure? I don't know who made it, probably some asshole. Wouldn't it be weird if you like knew somebody your whole life and then they revealed to you like later in your life that they had made one of these fucked up movies? Like imagine knowing the guy who made the bunny game. Well, so the bunny game is about a woman dressed up like a bunny who's being tortured. That sounds real original. And look at that. With that movie being out of the way, we have finished part 2 of the disturbing movie Iceberg. And for the most part, I added stuff to the list this time. So y'all have a lot of homework. If you want to get on my level, you're gonna need to catch up. I've been watching these for days now, and I forgot who I am. Okay, but in all seriousness, I do feel like I need to end this video and probably the next video with a tiny little uplifting little message, even though it might read as bullshit to you. I do want to say something about it. I find that having seen all of the horrible, fucked up things that I've seen in my life, it can be sometimes difficult to find things about life that are good. And the entire reasoning for this is because, like, our existence is colored by things that we experience and the things that we fill our little cup with. And so when you fill your cup 75% of the way with death and violence, then it kind of sours the other 25% because, like, you're expecting death and violence all the time, everywhere. There's a lot to life. A lot. There's a lot to life. If you squint your eyes and you only see certain things, you're going to think that life is only those certain things. It's like we live in a world where sometimes people legitimately forget that grass grows out of the ground. So hold on to your heart, and I'll be seeing you in the next part where we kill your heart completely dead like mine is dead. Okay, that was a joke. I do not mean that, but the next part is really going to be pretty harsh. I hate that I've had to break this up into 3 pieces, but, you know, I don't think anybody needs to endure this all at once. I really don't. Thank you all for watching. I hope you had a good time even though it was the worst. Thank you so much for watching the previous Iceberg. I haven't had a video do well in a really long time, so it was really nice to see a lot of people watching my YouTube channel again and commenting and telling me that they liked my cat ears. I'm so happy. If you like my videos, consider giving them a like, specifically this one, and sharing it with your friends. And also, if you love what I do, consider supporting me on Patreon. Thank you all for watching, and I cannot wait to see you in the next part. Goodbye!